himself until he's needed. We're not gonna start until 9:30.
It's straightforward, I think.
I think they're all right outside the floor.
Okay, I know they have like crumbs or something. So. So, in that case, I'm just people hang out in order. Yeah, I see what's going on.
This is so this is the next series. These guys are on a huge state. No, this isn't, it's not like that. Yeah. I mean, we made it.
Yes, good. Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay, let me stand in front of it. Okay, testing 1 2, testing 1 2. Okay, gotcha. All right, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay, we're actually doing something kind of neat because we're testing the camera right now.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason I'm talking. Can you hear us? Okay. All right, and just hit back. Okay. So he can hear me because I'm on the phone. So right now we're talking, just to see if this picks up the audio properly.
Okay.
And you might be calling back in a minute if it did, or you might send me a text.
Okay, well, hi, Skip. We'll see if it picks up.
And he just sent me a text, and survey says, perfect.
Good, okay.
All right, 10-4.
We were on, 2 years ago, I guess. Yeah, not last summer, summer before, the, murder case of the foster parents, the children. I did that case. And we were on 14 years the other day. Yeah. Call. There's two. That I don't know the family, but there's friends, I don't know this one thing. I don't really know about it. Yeah. This may be the one.
Oh, give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay, now turn this down. Yes, sir. Yes, all she has to do is click the link and issue letter. Okay, give me a few minutes, I'll be right back. There should be a link. There's like 3 links on that page. Give me 1 moment. If they have any issues, they should be able to get through it. So,
Nice talking to you too. We'll see you later.
I can take care of it. Thank
That's fine. That's fine, thank you.
470 to 481, you can bring him up.
I think we've worked out the logistics.
Oh, good.
Right, so that you're here and see and you can sit down. I think we are
Hey,
perfect.
Ms. Gallo,
Yes, sir.
why don't you go ahead and go through that door?
Sure.
You
Okay.
on the other side.
No problem. Sure, I can definitely do that.
Christina or Christine, I'm going to go to the galaxy map. Do you all want to come or no?
Right outside the door.
easier for you guys. For, you know, when they're squishier, but also, when he comes back in. I want to make sure I'm following what you guys have, but. Yeah, it's, my fault for, getting a little bit of a fancier pen.
All right, folks, I'm going to bring the judge out. Make sure your phones are on silent or off. Thank you. All right, Superior Court of Henry County now in session. The Honorable Arch Garrity presiding.
You may be seated.
Good morning.
All right. Make a couple of announcements. It's best if everyone wears their mask. The witnesses will be taking the stand with their mask on. Once they are seated, they will take their mask off if they want to, and I think that if they're hard of being able to hear, you can't hear from them, you get the microphone speaking, but get it up a little closer. Make sure the power's on. Now you should be able to hear me. Speaking of hearing, all right, we're going to make sure that the witnesses are close to the microphone. We're going to make sure that they'll be heard by everyone. I have my hearing aids tuned up, ready to go. We put a lot of new equipment out here, but we also have plexiglass. You do what's most comfortable for you, but as far as being here, if you're not participating as a witness, you need to be covered. I think everybody, I see a bunch of folks out there want to make sure. I don't know if everyone's been told about their cell phones being turned off. I have mine on 9 voice making vibration mode. Hopefully it won't make noise when it vibrates. And then then, if anybody has any questions proceeding wise, we'll deal with those at the time. I sure would like to own the plexiglass company. They've been making a lot of money during this COVID stuff. So that's all right. If it works, it works. All right, are we ready to proceed? And which motion are we gonna go with first today? I think y'all may have some idea.
Yes, Your Honor. The state has several witnesses here for the motion to suppress Mr. Baker's statements. So we would ask, he gave two statements, a short one in the driveway at his residence and then another one at the police department. I think since we have witnesses for that, we'd ask to start with that one. The other motions will be a witness, but they're going to be the state's last witness. So we could incorporate those other two motions with that last witness or divide them separately, however you'd like to do it.
All right. I assume you're gonna be handling that.
Yeah, Judge, I'll be handling the Jackson Denner hearing this morning. We're ready to proceed. Mr. Studowska will be handling the motion to suppress any evidence seized, and Mr. Studowska is ready to proceed as well.
All right. And court, has everybody identified themselves so that you're good to go? Thank you very much. All right, well, let's call the first witness. We'll deal with the motion to suppress the defendant's statements.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time the state calls Officer Steve Fergoli.
All right. Officer, you'll be given an oath, and then when you sit down and you face behind that plexiglass, you'll be able to take your mask off and testify. You're supposed to kind of clean up after you testify, not that they think you have anything, it's just that they do it after every witness, okay? So you'll give him the oath.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
You can have a seat, please.
Get close to the microphone and make the microphone close to you. You can move it. You want to make sure. I don't know any officer that I've ever dealt with a soft spoken, but just in case we happen to have one today, we need to have the microphone close.
Yes, sir.
All right?
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you go ahead and please state and spell your name for the record?
Officer Steve Fergoli, last name is spelled F-R-U-G-O-L-I,
Officer Fergoli, where are you employed?
Henry County Police Department,
How long have you been there?
since 1998.
Okay. And are you a post-certified mandated officer with arrest powers?
Yes,
Okay. And specifically back on October 27th, 2016, were you working for the Henry County Police Department then?
yes, ma'am.
And at that time, what shift did you work?
Day shift,
And what are the hours of day shift back then?
6 a.m. to 4 p.m.
And were you on duty that day between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m.?
Yes,
Okay. And did you, at the start of your shift, do you have something called roll call?
yes, that's just the name for when we come to work and we have a little briefing before we go out on patrol.
Okay. And did you have roll call that day? And were you advised in any way of any murders that had taken place earlier in that morning?
Yes,
Were you given any information with regards to those murders, anything to be on the lookout for?
yes.
What was that?
We were given instructions to be on the lookout for a white Jeep Cherokee with Georgia tag PSZ 5769, and that a individual, do you want me to give the name?
Yes, please, go ahead.
We were told to be on the lookout for an individual named Jacob Koski, and that he associated with individuals that resided at 3300 Highway 81 East in McDonough. And that was important to me because that's in the area that I patrol.
And what area is that? What zone is that?
It's considered zone 23 and 24.
Okay. And so were you familiar with that location, 3300 Highway 81 in McDonough?
Yes.
What, were you involved in any way as an officer with regards to the murder that occurred on Moccasin Gap Road the evening or earlier in the morning that same day?
I was not involved with
That investigation?
No.
Okay, so you were just made aware of that while you were out on patrol to be on the lookout for this white Jeep Cherokee and...
Yes, I was told that car was either related or was at the scene at some point, somehow associated with that homicide.
Okay. And so while you were out on patrol, at any point were you over near 3300 Highway 81 East in McDonough?
Yes.
Okay. And could you go ahead and explain to the court about what time was that?
At approximately 0950, I was traveling west on Highway 81 and I saw a white Jeep in the driveway of that address. I explained to dispatch that I could see a white Jeep, and I requested backup from my fellow officers.
Okay. And when you say that address, are you referring to 3300 Highway 81 East?
Yes.
While you were waiting for backup, did you see anyone in or around that Jeep?
Yes, I couldn't tell exactly how many there were. These were younger individuals, teenage years that I could estimate. I saw them get into the vehicle, and I did believe at the time that because of where I was sitting, I was trying to sit in a place to where I could keep an eye on that vehicle, but I didn't want to pull up into that driveway. So where I was sitting, I'm almost positive they knew that I saw them just by the way they reacted. They hesitated before getting in the car. It was like they were trying to make their minds up as to whether or not they were going to get in the vehicle. At one point, the young man, they did get in the vehicle. Then a few minutes later, one young man got back out. He walked towards the front door of the house, and he shortly later came back and got back in the vehicle.
Now, at this point, the information that you have is that that white Jeep is somehow associated with what at that point was a triple homicide over on Moccasin Gap Road?
Yes, once I could see the tag and confirm the tag that they gave us at roll call earlier, just several hours before we finding the car. That fact, along with the fact that they were at the address that was associated, which I didn't know how that information had been gathered, but once I confirmed the tag, dispatch said, yes, that's the Jeep. So,
Okay.
yes.
And you said from your vantage point, it appeared that they could see you. Could you explain to the judge, where were you at that point?
I was directly across the street in a driveway that set up on a hill. That was really the best place that I could be, because like I said, it was a 2-lane highway. I couldn't stop the road. I didn't want to pull into their driveway for obvious reasons. I mean, this was a multiple homicide. I was waiting on backup.
And so were other officers also in that same roll call, and they were all looking for this same white Jeep?
Yes.
Okay. So now when you see, you said a young man got out and went back into the residence?
He went, I didn't see him go in the residence. I actually kind of lost sight of him because of trees.
Okay.
But he he came back and got back into the vehicle with the other people that were in the vehicle already.
Okay, and what did that vehicle do once he got back in?
They pulled out of the driveway and went east on Highway 81, and I followed them. They turned left onto Pine Tree Drive. I followed them at a safe distance. They got into the dead-end cul-de-sac and turned around. I got out of the way by backing down the side street, and they came back out of the subdivision they pulled into. They turned right, making them go back west on Highway 81. I followed them. They pulled back into their driveway. By this time, other officers had arrived, and that's when we got out of our vehicles and approached them.
Okay, and you say pulled back into their driveway. Are you talking about that original address, 3300 Highway 81?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that's here in Henry County?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about once they pulled back into the driveway, and you said at this point other officers had arrived?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what happened, or tell the judge what happened after they pulled back into the driveway.
It was myself, Officer Danielson, and Officer Padgett. As they pulled back into their driveway, they began getting out of their vehicle. When I say they, I think 3 to 4 teenage individuals. And we just, myself, Officer Danielson, and Officer Padgett, we just immediately detained everybody for their safety and ours. Couldn't give you an exact number of how many individuals there were. I would say 3 to 4.
Okay.
I did not know if those individuals were involved with the actual homicide, and neither did the officers that were with me. So that was the main reason for just detaining everyone. Then shortly, a few seconds after that, even more officers arrived, and those officers kept an eye on those individuals because there were other people still inside the house that we had to deal with.
And had you been given the name of Jacob Koski?
Yes.
Okay, and was that an individual that you were looking for associated with the 3 homicides earlier that morning?
Yes.
Okay. To your knowledge, at that point, was Jacob Koski in the house at 3300 Highway 81?
We didn't know if he was or not.
Okay. When you approached the individuals that got out of the Jeep, what did y'all have them do?
Lay down on the ground.
And did they comply?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did you know that Matthew Baker was one of those individuals?
I felt pretty certain what one of them was because I actually knew him from and having encounters with him as a younger teenager.
Okay. And did you know that that was his home, or you weren't sure?
Yes.
You did know. Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about once you got them on the ground and other officers were there as well. At any point did you approach the house looking for Jacob Koski?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And at that point, were you told that Jacob Koski was a suspect in the triple homicide?
I already knew that he was a suspect.
Okay, so at that point, you already knew that from roll call?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about once you got everybody out of the Jeep, and what did you do once they were all secured on the ground?
I specifically remember being in really close proximity to a young white female. She and I had eye contact, and I specifically asked her if Jacob Koski was in the house, and she said no. But I wasn't gonna just assume that was the truth. A few seconds later, other officers, like I said, came up and kept an eye on these guys that were laying down. And it was Danielson, Padgett, I think Lieutenant Maddox. We stacked up and made our entry into the house. And there was another female with an infant in there that we got her to safety. And we made sure the inside of the house was safe. And we did not locate Jacob Koski in there.
Okay. Now the young female that you said you spoke to, that she said that he was not in the house, did she indicate whether or not they had been with Jacob Koski earlier?
She did say that. She did in fact say that she was with him earlier.
And when you all went into the house, were the people that got out of the Jeep, Mr. Baker being one of them, were they still in the driveway at that point, or had they been relocated for safety?
As we approached the house, other officers were in the process of moving those individuals, mainly some of them to the back of other patrol cars. I do know that some of them were transported. All of them may have been. I wasn't involved with that.
Okay.
I do know that some of those individuals, and all of them may have been taken back to the police station so the detectives could speak with them. But I didn't have any involvement with that.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about, you said you went to the house. Was there at any point a dog that you encountered?
Yes, there was one last room we had not searched. There was a dog in there barking, and the decision was made. We didn't want to have. We could tell that it was an aggressive dog, and we didn't want to have to kill it. So the decision was made to let someone go in and get the dog.
Okay. And secure the dog?
Yes.
Okay. And was that person that did that, was that Matthew Baker?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about once Mr. Baker came in the house, was he handcuffed when he came in the house?
No.
Once he came in and secured the dog, did he stay in the house with you, or did he leave the house?
He was escorted back out of the house.
Once he was escorted out of the house, were you able to check that last area of the house?
Yes, there was no one else in there.
Okay. And so you were not able to find Mr. Koski in the home?
Correct. No, we did not find him.
Let's talk a little bit about while you were going in the house, you said other officers were dealing with the folks who were there in the driveway?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever see those folks again after you came out of the house unhandcuffed? Meaning not in handcuffs?
When I came out of the house, I knew that my part of that scenario was finished. I can say that I remember some individuals not being handcuffed, but it wasn't something that I was concentrating on, if that makes sense. I was finished with that assignment.
Okay, so your portion at that point.
Right.
Okay. But you did see other folks who were there at the house. You did see them I'm not asking you if you saw someone unhandcuff them. I'm asking you, did you see them walking around not wearing handcuffs?
Yes, in a situation like that, it's fair to say that just because if we tell someone to get on the ground, they're obviously, yes, they're being detained, but it doesn't mean they're under arrest. For a few seconds, I mean, in a situation like that, when you don't know who may have a gun, or especially when you're dealing with suspects who were involved with a homicide, I mean, there's a lot of risk that has to be thought about in seconds to make decisions on. And obviously the safest thing to do in a situation like that is to just detain everyone.
Okay. And so as you were so it's done for officer safety?
For our safety, for their safety, until we can figure out who's who and make sure no one's armed and make sure no one's wanting to hurt us. Standard.
Okay. And so when they were, you said some of them may have been moved away to patrol cars. Is that done for their safety as well? In case anyone is in the house that's armed?
Well, for that, and I'm sure that plans were being made as to getting them transported back to the station so that the detectives can speak to them.
But you know that part of it is for their own safety as well? Let's talk a little bit about when you came out of the house and you said your part of the situation was done. Did you do anything else there at 3300 Highway 81?
No.
Did you yourself talk to anybody?
Just initially when we approached the Jeep and got those individuals out initially, just all I really said to them was to get down on the ground. And I asked the female that I had eye contact with if Kosky was in the house.
Okay. Did you question Matthew Baker at all?
No.
And you said that you knew Matthew Baker from before, or you'd had interactions with him before?
Over the years, it was nothing bad. I remember receiving calls to their residence.
Okay.
And talking with him and his mother.
Okay. And so do you see Matthew Baker here in the courtroom today?
Honestly, I assume that's the young man at the defense table, but he does look different now than what I remember. He's grown up.
Okay. All right, that's all the questions that I have.
Cross?
Yes, Judge. Good morning, Officer Fergoli.
Good morning.
My name is Christina Rudy. I'm one of the lawyers that represents Mr. Baker, and I just have a few questions for you this morning. If at all you can't hear me, just ask me to raise my voice, and I'll happily do that. I just want to ask you a few questions about sort of what that scene looked like at 3300 Highway 81. You first noticed this white Jeep Cherokee at around 9:50 in the morning. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the next thing that you did was you requested backup. How long was it between when you requested backup and when that backup arrived? Do you know?
Some of them would have arrived 2 minutes later. Some arrived 4 or 5 minutes later.
Okay. So it was within a number of minutes. Okay. Now, the vehicle that you were in that morning, was that a marked patrol car or was it an unmarked patrol car?
It was marked.
A marked patrol car. And can you describe for the court what marked patrol cars in Henry County looked like in October of 2016? Just a general description.
Silver, black lettering. It says Henry County Police. And an emergency light bar on the roof.
At what point during that morning did you activate the lights on your patrol car?
After they had pulled out, I followed them. I did not blue light them at that time. They turn around, they go back into their driveway, and literally, actually, I didn't even pull up in their driveway as other police cars were arriving. I stopped in the middle of the highway and turned on my blue lights so that we could block that section of Highway 81.
And the reason that you blocked that section of Highway 81 was so that no one else would be able to enter that area, correct?
That and the fact that it was just so difficult. I mean, it's one of those places where it's just, there's nowhere to pull over. I mean, the way the road is designed, there's nowhere to park. But yes, mainly to keep citizens from driving through in front of that house is obvious reasons.
And to keep that white Jeep Grand Cherokee from leaving too,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, you blocked the highway and another police car blocked the other part of the highway?
Yes.
Okay. So from either direction, nobody was able to come or go into that area, correct?
Right.
Okay. The other officers that arrived were the first ones that arrived. I believe that you said that their names were Officer Danielson and Officer Padgett, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, Officers Danielson and Padgett, were they in marked or unmarked patrol cars? Do you recall?
I know Padgett was, and I'm pretty sure Danielson was as well. I don't think he had been promoted. No, he was in a marked vehicle.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, I'm not questioning, I just want to make sure that I understand both Officer Danielson and Padgett, to the best of your memory, were in marked patrol cars, is that right? Okay. When you arrived back at 3300 Highway 81, did Officers Danielson and Padgett have their emergency lights activated?
I'm sure they did. They were parked down there on the highway too.
Did you activate your siren?
No.
Do you recall whether Officers Danielson or Padgett activated their sirens at that time?
No, nobody did.
So Officers Danielson and Padgett were the first ones to arrive, the first backup to arrive on the scene, is that right?
Yes.
And then you had stated at least one other officer, Officer Maddox, arrived on the scene, is that correct?
I think he was a shift lieutenant at the time.
Uh-huh. And if you could educate me, does that mean that?
He was a supervisor, one of our supervisors.
Okay, and would a supervisor be in a marked or unmarked?
Marked.
On a marked vehicle. Do you recall whether or not Officer Maddox or Lieutenant Maddox had his lights activated?
Everybody would have that
Okay.
stopped down there on the highway.
And do you recall whether or not Officer Maddox had his sirens activated?
Nobody had their sirens.
Okay. Now, can you describe how patrol officers, that would be yourself, Officer Danielson, Officer Padgett, how were you dressed? Were you in a uniform? Were you, just describe for us how you were dressed.
I was in my police uniform.
And that includes having a badge on your uniform,
Yes.
correct? And did you have a police issued firearm with you that morning?
Yes.
And recall whether or not Officers Danielson and Padgett were also dressed in uniforms?
They were,
And do you recall whether Danielson and Padgett had firearms?
yes,
When you exited your vehicle, did you at any time draw your firearm?
yes,
Did Danielson or Padgett draw their firearms? And at that point, you ordered the occupants of this Jeep Cherokee to exit the vehicle, correct?
yes,
And you ordered them to get on the ground
yes,
in the driveway, right?
yes.
At that point, did you or Officer Danielson or Officer Padgett place handcuffs on any of those individuals?
I know I didn't.
You did not.
No.
Do you recall whether Danielson or Padgett did?
I don't remember.
But you had your firearms drawn?
Yes,
You, and everyone complied with your orders, correct?
yes.
When you said that you and the other, well, actually, I want to ask this question first. You have given me the name of 3 different officers that have arrived, and that would be 3 different patrol cars at that point, in addition to yours, so a total of 4 initially, correct?
Yes,
Did other officers arrive after that?
yes.
Do you recall about how many?
There may have been 6, 8 more.
6 or 8 more, so a total of 10 to 12 police cars were
I
there?
don't know.
Okay. But it was certainly more than 1 or 2 more cars?
Yes.
Okay. And would those have been a mixture of cars that were marked and unmarked, or would they have all been marked?
The majority of them would have been marked. I mean, I don't know who all arrived.
Sure, sure. I'm just asking you
But
what it is that you
a
remember.
detective could have heard what was going on and could have arrived in an unmarked car. I just don't know.
Okay. Now, you mentioned on direct that you used the phrase stacked up and entered the house. Can you describe for the court what that means?
The way we're trained to approach a house, we line up behind each other, one behind the other. So the 4 of us would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, and you move in a straight line, straight to the front door.
And that's a tactical
Yes.
technique, correct?
Yes,
When you stacked up and entered the house, were your guns drawn?
yes.
Officer, what type of firearm were you issued in October of 2016? Was it I passed force? I'm sorry, go ahead, I'll let you
A
finish.
Glock handgun. Also, we also have patrol rifles.
And that morning, did you have your handgun or did you have your rifle? Do you recall?
I do believe I did have my rifle.
And when everyone stacked up to enter the house, do you recall whether or not people had handguns or rifles? Do you recall?
Both.
Both? Okay. When you stacked up and entered the house, where were the occupants of the vehicle at that time? Do you remember?
They were behind us, being dealt with by other officers, being moved.
So there was an officer with them
There were-
at all
yes,
times?
Yes,
You had stated that at one point you let Mr. Baker come in to deal with the family dog. Is that right?
I believe that was Lieutenant Maddox's decision.
Did Mr. Baker enter the home alone or did he enter accompanied with a police officer?
I don't remember.
You don't remember, okay. Now, at some point, the individuals that had been in that vehicle and had exited were moved away from that vehicle, right?
Yes,
Do you recall where they were moved to?
I'm sure they were moved to patrol cars to be transported.
And it was law enforcement officers that let them know where they needed to go, right?
Yes.
If I could just have one more moment. I apologize, Judge, if I just have one moment. I don't have any further questions at this time, Judge.
Redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor, yes. Officer Fergoli, when you parked your vehicle in the road, were you parked behind the driveway or behind the Jeep, blocking the Jeep in?
No.
So at that point, you were merely blocking people from having access to that road area so that you all could investigate and see if Jacob Koski was in the house?
Yes.
And now you said you had your firearms drawn?
That's correct.
Is that because you were looking for a man who was suspected of killing nearly four people?
That's correct.
And you said at some point after you came out of the house, you saw the other individuals who had been in the vehicle in that Jeep moved away, and you said that you were sure that they were moved to patrol cars. Did you actually interact with any of those folks after you came out of the house?
No.
Okay. So are you guessing what was going on, or just what you observed, that's what it looked like was going on?
Objection, leading.
I don't think that's leading over.
Say it one more time, please.
Sure. Are you guessing at what was going on, or are you just saying that's what you observed and that's...
Out of my peripheral, that there were officers interacting with individuals that we got out of the Jeep. Some were being led, walked, escorted, however you want to say it. But I was not concentrating on any of that.
And
So
were you...
I can't say exactly what. So to be fair, I can't say what exactly the officers were doing with those individuals.
Okay. And then those same individuals, are those the same individuals that you said earlier that you then saw kind of walking around unhandcuffed, not handcuffed?
Correct.
So just so I'm clear, just so the judge is clear, is it safe to say that at some point those individuals were detained, but then they were no longer detained once you cleared the house?
I believe that's what happened.
And did you have any part in talking to any of them or asking any of them if they would agree to be interviewed?
No, I did not.
Did you have any part in, once they agreed to be interviewed, transporting anyone to the police department? And the uniform that you were wearing that day, and the firearm that you were carrying, and the patrol car that you were riding in, and the badge that you had, is that your standard uniform and vehicle that you use every day when you're on patrol?
Yes, ma'am.
And based on what you observed of the other patrol cars that were there, and the other officers that were there, Same type deal, their standard patrol unit and same standard uniform?
Yes.
That's all the questions I have, Judge.
Judge, just very briefly. Officer Fergoli, this was related to as the state mentioned, at the time, triple homicides. This was a serious case, correct?
Yes.
And when you have a serious case, you officers take the situation very seriously. Would that be an accurate statement?
Yes.
And you're concerned about your safety during those kinds of situations, aren't you?
Yes.
And when you were concerned about your safety and the safety of others, it is important for officers to know who is on the scene, correct? Who's in the area? That's why you searched the house, correct?
You're asking me if it's important for me to know who is on the scene?
Well, I'm asking you whether or not it is, I'll rephrase the question. I phrased that poorly, officer, I'm sorry. The question that I have for you is, in a serious situation such as this, it is important for officer safety for you to know which individuals are in the area, in the immediate area. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. And that was why you searched the house, correct?
Yes.
That's why you stepped up in order to enter the house. Would that be fair too?
Yes.
And so it would be fair to say that any person could not just walk through that area without an officer escort. Would that be fair? A fair statement?
No, we would not let just anyone walk through while we were.
So the officers.
Objection, I would ask that she allow the witness to finish his statement.
I apologize.
Do you have anything to add to your answer?
No, I was just going to answer by saying that no, we would not let someone randomly walk around, while we were clearing the house.
Right, and officer, thank you. I don't think that I have any further questions at this time. Thank you, sir.
Further questions of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
Maybe resume putting your mask on and you'll still be on call, at the discretion of the state. I assume they subpoenaed you. And did y'all also subpoena?
Yes, Judge.
Okay, so you've got two folks looking for you. You may not get a call back. Thank you. You can step down.
I will call, am I on call or do you need me to stay, on the premises?
I assume y'all have a cell phone, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so if that, somebody will, put you back to work or whatever it is you're doing.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, before the next witness comes in, we need our cleaning crew in. Sanitize the witness area.
Yeah.
So you'll call me if you need.
Yes, I'll come back if either side needs you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I don't know what that was.
It was that fun? Step down medication, which means they won't completely release paper off the blood pressure. There'll be one that's less, I guess,
So, she just texted me, she moved to about almost an hour ago, she was still waiting. Last time I got in, and I said, wait, this is 5 minutes, you can back. They called me to go back and see her, I used to him, I said, never wrong, she's almost in the room, so I don't think they want me back there with confused. They keep people safe, so everything worked out. We have another witness to call. I'm assuming the sanitation has been done.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. At this time, the state calls Sergeant Paul Danielson.
All right, officer, after you've been given the oath, you'll have a seat and remove your mask. Make sure you speak into the microphone. Your area has been sanitized. Sir, all right?
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, you can have a seat.
Have a seat, take your mask off.
Could you go ahead and please state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Sergeant Paul Danielson, PaulDanielson.
Okay. And where are you employed?
The Henry County Police Department.
And in what capacity do you work for the Henry County Police Department?
Right now, I'm a training sergeant.
Okay. And Sergeant Danielson, did you work for the Henry County Police Department back in 2016?
I did.
And specifically back on October 27th, 2016, were you on duty that day, that morning?
I was.
Okay. And are you post-certified?
I am.
Okay. Let's go back to October 27th, 2016. Did you respond at any point to 3300 Highway 81 East in McDonough?
I did.
Okay. And when you responded, did you know why you were responding there? Let me ask a better question. Did you know that you were looking for someone that morning who may be at that address?
Yes, we were actually briefed that morning in roll call that there had been a triple homicide that had occurred with a fourth individual that was up at Grady that was not doing well. We were told that there was a white Jeep that we were looking for that was associated with that address.
Okay. And the white Jeep was associated, when you say that address, you mean the 3300 Highway 81 East?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you at any point respond to that address?
I did.
How did you know to respond to that address?
Officer Fergoli had stated over the radio that he had located the white Jeep, and the Jeep, he had followed it, and it had pulled into the driveway of that address.
Okay. And when you got there, were there any other officers there?
When I initially got there, it was myself and Officer Fergoli. As I was getting out of the car, there were several other officers that were pulling up.
Okay. And do you recall who any of the other officers were that were pulling up?
I want to say Officer Phillips, and our entire traffic unit had pulled up. I know that Lieutenant Maddox had pulled up because I spoke with him over the radio during the felony stop. There were several that had pulled up.
Okay. When you got there, what did you first observe when you got to that address?
There were multiple people that were in the vehicle. Officer Fergoli began giving commands, and I just took cover and made sure that I was a good cover officer for him to make sure that no one was getting hurt.
At this point, did you know the name Jacob Koski?
Yes.
And were you looking for Jacob Koski?
Yes, ma'am. That was who we were looking for.
Okay. And was Jacob Koski believed to have been, at that point, the person who had committed what at that point was 3 murders, but injured the 4th person who was in the hospital?
Yes, he was the primary person of interest in the homicide.
Okay. And as you were giving everyone commands, or as they were being commanded to get on the ground, what was the purpose of that?
Standard police procedure is we make a scene safe so that our investigators can come in, getting them out of the vehicle, making sure that everyone is unarmed, making sure that everyone is secured, making sure that everyone is well, for lack of, they're safe and we're safe while the investigation is being conducted.
So that is done for your safety as well as the safety of the individuals?
Correct.
And is that done for the safety of anyone who might be around as well?
Correct.
Do you recall how many people it was that were near that Jeep?
The exact number, no. I just know that there were multiple people that were in it, as well as there were people coming out of the house.
And does that complicate things at all when you have the multiple people there by the Jeep and then other people approaching from the house?
Oh, yes.
How does that complicate it?
Trying to manage multiple people that are coming in and out of a house, trying to manage the traffic stop in and of itself, trying to manage the fact that you've got so many hands to watch, so many people to watch, and given the scope of the crime that we were investigating, we knew that we had one person that was a person of interest, but we also knew that there were other people that were in the Jeep, but we didn't know the extent of involvement that anyone else had at that point. So it was one of those deals that everybody gets secured, everybody gets put in the handcuffs, and we're going to sort everything out as soon as we can figure out who we're supposed to be talking to and who we're not. But to be honest with you, as a uniform patrol officer, that's not for me to determine. We make everything safe, get everything calmed down, get everything slowed down, and then we call in the investigators so that they can come in and take care of it.
Okay. And is that what happened that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about getting everybody safe. How did you all do that?
As I was covering, there were multiple officers that came up and began to handcuff the individuals that were in the Jeep and those that were coming out of the house. Once people started coming out of the house, I radioed to Lieutenant Maddox at the time, who had pulled up on scene. I'm also a member of the SWAT team, and Lieutenant Maddox at the time was our commander. He asked if we needed a shield to go in and clear the house and make sure that Kowski wasn't inside the house, so I said yes. At that point, I sprinted up the street, grabbed the shield from his vehicle, and sprinted back down to the actual doorway of the house while everything else was going on behind me.
Okay. When you went, did you go into the house to check for Jacob Kowski in the home?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and how did you all go about doing that?
The very first thing that we did is standard procedure for our SWAT team. We do what we call a surround and call out. We announced through the door. We were also told there was someone on scene that told us that there were other people inside the house as well as a small infant. We began calling out to those that were in the house, and I want to say that there was a young lady that came out with a baby. At that point, it was myself, Lieutenant Maddox, Lieutenant Bolton, and Sergeant Gagnon who all made entry into the house to go clear it and make sure that Kowski was not inside the house.
Okay. Now, was this done, you mentioned at the time that you happened to be on SWAT. Were you called out there at that point as a SWAT officer or as a uniformed patrol officer who responded to the scene?
I worked on the shift, so I was there, and just happenstance, I'm on the SWAT team, and I was actually the point man on the team at the time.
The other officers that went in the house with you, were they all also SWAT?
The only other one that was SWAT was Lieutenant Maddox. Lieutenant Bolton had experience with SWAT, but I don't think he was on the team at the time.
And Officer Fergoli, was he on SWAT at the time?
No, ma'am. And if I'm not mistaken, he didn't come inside the house with us, if I remember right.
Okay. If you're not sure of that, though, is that correct?
I was on the shield. I know for a fact that I had those four because as I was dumping people into rooms, I remember hearing their voices. I don't remember hearing Officer Fergoli inside the house, but there again, I was on the shield, so my back is to everything that's going on with me, but that anyone would be doing behind me.
Gotcha. So he may have been one of the officers with you. You're just not, you
Yes,
can't say for sure. Okay.
Yes.
And at the time that you went into the house, where were the people from the Jeep?
If I remember right, they were still standing out in the driveway.
And the female that came out, I think you said she had a child?
Yes.
Okay, was she handcuffed?
To be honest with you, I don't know. My responsibility was covering the door. She came out, passed by me, and was handed off to other officers, so if she was handcuffed, I wouldn't be able to tell you yes or no on that.
When you went into the house and cleared the house, were you able to locate Jacob Koski in the house?
No, ma'am.
Was there a dog in the house?
Yes, there was.
Okay. Do you recall how that situation was handled with the dog?
The dog was very aggressive. If I remember correctly, he was in the garage. It was a very large dog, and they came over the radio and said that the dog's owner was going to come inside and get the dog and move it to a room that we had already cleared so that we didn't have to end up putting the dog down to get the house cleared. And that took place. One of those subjects that was outside on the driveway came inside, went into the garage, was able to grab the dog, and if I remember right, moved the dog into a laundry room so that we didn't have to destroy the dog, and we were able to get the house cleared the rest of the way.
And was that person that came in, was that Matthew Baker?
I was told later on, yes, ma'am. That was him.
At the time, did you know that was
At the
Matthew
time,
Baker?
I had no idea who it was. I was just told it was the dog's owner.
And when he came in, was he wearing handcuffs?
No.
And when you went through, after he moved the dog to the laundry room, did Mr. Baker then leave the house?
Yes, ma'am. If it was in fact Mr. Baker that came inside, then yes, ma'am. Whoever came inside to get the dog was then asked to leave, and they were escorted out of the house so that we could finish clearing of the garage.
At the time when you were clearing the house, did you have any idea who else might be in the house other than that female that had come out?
No, ma'am.
All right. Once you cleared the house, what did you do?
Exited the house, made sure that the officers didn't need anything. I gave the shield back to Lieutenant Maddox so he could store it back in his car, and I left.
And at that time, when you were investigating and looking for a suspect regarding what at that time was a triple homicide, which eventually turned into a quadruple homicide, was it standard procedure, given those circumstances, to get everyone out, get them on the ground, and handcuff them?
Yes. If we talk about our procedure and we talk about our policies on investigations and use of force, if you were to tell me that we are supposed to deal with tense, uncertain circumstances that are rapidly evolving and that we have to make those split-second decisions, when you're dealing with a triple homicide and an aggravated assault, that's pretty much the definition. We don't know what's going on. We don't know who it is that we're dealing with. We knew we had one person of interest who was identified, but didn't really know anyone else that we were dealing with. But we knew that there were other people that were in the Jeep. We had no idea what their involvement was going to be. We had no idea what was going on. So our procedure is get in, get everyone secured, slow everything down, and then let the investigators come in and sort through what's going on.
And so when you were looking for that Jeep and that address, did you know that the folks who were associated with that Jeep and that address were somehow connected to Jacob Koski?
Yes. We knew that he had ridden in that Jeep to get to the location where the actual homicides had occurred. And he also had left in that Jeep.
Did you personally know any of the individuals who were there at the house that day?
No, ma'am.
When you cleared the house and you said you exited the house, you gave the shield back, did you come out and speak to any of the 4 people that had come out of the Jeep?
No, ma'am.
Did you question anybody?
When I came out of the house, if I'm not mistaken, there were already detectives that were on scene, and they were already starting to speak to different people. And as a uniform patrol officer, I'm not going to interject myself into their investigation as it's going on.
When you came out, I know that you mentioned earlier that the folks from the Jeep were put on the ground. Were they handcuffed?
Yes.
When you came out of the house, were they out of the handcuffs at that point?
To be honest, I think some probably were and some probably were not. I didn't pay too much attention to who was in handcuffs and who wasn't. As I was walking out of the house, I saw that there were multiple officers that were on scene, there were detectives on scene, and I felt pretty safe. Was just headed to Lieutenant Maddox's car, dropping the shield off.
Once you dropped the shield off, did that end your involvement, or did you do anything else?
No, ma'am. After I dropped the shield off, almost our entire shift was there. We had calls open, so I went to go answer calls.
And you said you went to answer calls. Did you transport anyone to be interviewed?
No, ma'am.
Did you have any direct interaction with Matthew Baker?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Yes, Judge. Good morning, Sergeant Danielson. How are you this morning?
I'm good, ma'am. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm Christine Gertie, one of the lawyers that represents Mr. Baker. I just have a few questions for you. So you are a post-certified law enforcement officer, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you undergo additional training in order to be a member of the SWAT team?
Yes.
Did you undergo even additional training to be, you said you were a point person on the SWAT team, is that right?
Correct.
And that requires additional training too?
Yes.
Now, when you guys entered the home, that's what you call being stacked up, is that right?
Correct.
And is that a SWAT technique?
That's just a multiple officer technique.
Okay.
Anytime we teach building clearing, if you have more than 2 officers, you're going to stack up and you're going to go with a single file line. It presents less of a target profile if there's anything that goes on inside the house, and also lets you clear the house systematically.
And when you approach the house and clear the house, as you said, systematically, do the officers have their weapons drawn?
As we're clearing a house?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have your weapons drawn that morning?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you recall whether they were pistols or rifles?
I had my pistol. I can't carry a shield with a rifle, so I had my pistol out. As far as what went on behind me, I'm not sure what weapon systems. I know that we probably had rifles in the stack, but I don't know who would have had them.
But to the best of your recollection, every person that was in that stack was carrying a firearm and had that firearm drawn. Would that be right?
Yes, ma'am. That'd be standard procedure.
Now, you talked earlier about one of your responsibilities as a patrol officer is to secure people and to slow the scene down, right?
Yes.
When you say secure people, what do you mean?
Make sure that they are not going to go anywhere. Make sure that their hands are either visible or that their hands are secured. And normally we do a quick Terry frisk and make sure that they're not armed, depending on what the circumstances are.
And you do that for safety reasons, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And for those same safety reasons, you or at least one of the other officers needs to know everyone who is in the immediate area, right? You want to keep track of the people that are around. Is that a fair statement?
Keep track of.
Keep track of so we'll use this example, and I apologize for phrasing that question poorly. The individuals that were in that vehicle, you wanted to keep track of them, correct?
Whoever the case officer would be, yes, we want to make sure that they are put in a position where we can manage their positioning so that they don't leave, but also in a position to where they can't speak to each other, because if they start talking, then it taints their statements and starts messing with the investigation.
Right, and you don't want someone entering the scene that you guys don't know about, right?
Correct.
And you don't want someone that you've seen that you want to speak to leaving, right?
I don't know who we wanted to speak to on this particular scene. So anyone who came into the scene and would have introduced themselves into the scene, given, like I said earlier, given the fact that we're having to deal with what we thought at the time was a triple homicide, we've got multiple people that are coming out, some that are upset, some that maybe didn't know what was going on. So for their safety and for ours, yes, they all get secured and handcuffed.
And that's just everyone who is there, everyone is secured. If someone comes onto the scene, they're there until an investigator lets them leave, is that right?
Yes, that's what should happen, yes.
Okay. And to the best of your recollection or knowledge, is that what happened in this situation?
To be honest with you, ma'am, as I stated earlier, I'm positioned at the front door. The people who came out of the house, I don't know if they were secured or not. I have no idea. That wasn't my responsibility. And if I turn my face or I turn my attention away from what my area of responsibility is, that's when people usually end up getting hurt. So I was concentrating more on the door at that point, and I had to trust in the officers behind me that they were going to do what needed to be done.
Absolutely. So there was, I just have a few other questions for you. You had mentioned that, at one point you mentioned that the entire traffic division was present, and a little bit later on direct you mentioned entire shift. Can you please tell the court how many patrol cars were present on the scene to the best of your
I
recollection?
have no idea how many. I know that Highway 81 was all but shut down right there in front of the house. I know that there were quite a few patrol cars that were there.
More than 3 or 4,
Correct.
right? So would you say, and I understand you may not have a specific number, 10, 12, 15?
I don't think there were that many.
Okay. You don't think that there were as many as 15?
Ma'am, I wouldn't be able to give you a direct number. I don't know.
So I want to ask a question about the traffic division. The cars that you saw there, were they marked cars, unmarked cars, a mixture?
There should have been a mixture that were there because we had detectives that were there along with a bunch of uniformed officers.
Would the uniformed officers be in the marked cars?
Normally, yes. Sometimes not, depending on the detail they may be doing. But yes.
Generally speaking, the uniformed officers are in the marked cars.
Correct.
And generally speaking, the detectives are in the unmarked cars. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes, ma'am.
To the best of your, let me just ask about what you did. When you arrived, did you have the lights on your vehicle activated?
Yes, I ran lights and sirens to get to Officer Fergoli when he called and said that he had the vehicle pulling into the driveway.
Okay.
Once again, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know who was in the car. We didn't know Kowski was in the car with them. And given the circumstances of the crime we were investigating, I wanted to get there as quickly as possible to make sure that Officer Fergoli had someone with him.
And the other officers were thinking the same as you and had their lights and sirens on to the best of your memory.
Objection calls for speculation as to what the other officers were thinking.
Judge, if I could clarify, what I did say was to the best of the officer's memory or knowledge. I would agree that he doesn't, I'm not asking him about stuff he didn't see, I'm just asking him about the patrol cars and the unmarked vehicles that he saw. Did they have their lights and sirens on?
Objection over.
I don't know. Given the stress of what's going on and what's in front of me, having to call out commands, in those type of stressful situations, you're gonna experience what's called auditory exclusion, and you're also gonna experience what's called tunnel vision. I was so focused and concentrated on the house and the suspects at the time, I didn't hear lights and sirens. All I can tell you is that given the circumstances that we were dealing with, I would hate to assume, but I would assume that our officers all drove up and got there as quickly as they could using lights and sirens.
And that's what you did in this situation.
Yes, ma'am.
And that day, as you're dressed today, you're dressed in your uniform. Were you dressed similarly that day?
Yes, I believe I was in short sleeves though.
But still with your uniform, with your badge and your firearm, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you personally handcuff anyone?
No, ma'am.
When you arrived, it was Officer Fergoli who was giving the orders to exit the vehicle and get on the ground, is that right?
Correct.
The primary person of interest in this case was Jacob Kosky, is that right?
Yes.
The person that was mentioned during the roll call that morning, that was not Mr. Baker, right?
No, ma'am.
The person that entered the home to secure the dog, that person would have entered the home escorted by a law enforcement officer.
Escorted by another officer, yes.
And then escorted back on out, right? They would have been able to roam around the house unescorted,
No,
right? Okay.
No, ma'am.
Whether they're handcuffed or not, you're gonna know where they are for your safety, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If I may have just one moment. I don't have any further questions at this time, Judge.
Redirect.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Sergeant Danielson, when you entered the home to clear the home and you had your weapons drawn, once you cleared the home, did you put up your weapon then?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Did the other officers do the same?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there any officers who were walking around the scene once you had cleared the home that you observed pointing firearms at anyone?
No, ma'am.
Okay, was the scene at that point, once it was secured, knowing that Jacob Koski was not in the house, did the tense moments calm down then?
So as far as I can't speak for the other officers, but as far as for my tension, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And from what you observed, the other officers did not have anyone at gunpoint at that point?
No, ma'am.
Right. All the other officers had their weapons holstered?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. When you arrived on the scene and you said you were, to get there to Officer Fergoli as backup, you ran lights and sirens. Did you turn that siren off once you got there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But you think you still had your lights on, or did you turn your lights
They were
off?
probably still on because I don't remember if my vehicle was still half in or half out of the street pulling into the driveway. The driveway of the address actually comes in and then it wides and splits off to two separate houses. I don't remember if my vehicle was half in or half out of the street. I just know that I pulled up behind or very close to where Officer Fergoli's vehicle was and got out and started assisting with covering down the vehicle.
And then once the scene was secured, everybody was unhandcuffed, you returned the shield, and then you left.
I'm not sure who was handcuffed or unhandcuffed. I have no idea. Like I said, when I came out of the house, there were multiple officers that were there along with detectives. There hadn't been an incident while we were inside, so I assumed that there wasn't going to be an incident once I came out. I put the shield away, didn't really pay too much attention to what was going on because the officers were there. And then put the shield away, got in my vehicle, and went on to my next call.
And at that point, you don't know who was asked to be interviewed. Is that correct?
I have no idea.
You don't know if any detectives asked anyone to come up to the police department to give a statement or give an interview?
At that point, no, ma'am.
Okay. That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Sergeant Danielson, I just have just one more question for you. The patrol cars in Henry County in October of 2016, were they equipped with dash cams that activate when lights and sirens are activated?
Yes.
I don't believe I have any further questions at this time. Thank you.
I do have another question, Judge, based on that question. Are you sure in 2016, are you sure that didn't happen until February of 2018, that they got equipped with dash cam?
I know that we have had dash cams off and on, whether it was VHS or not. I do know that any footage that we would have had from then or 2018 when they were installed, about 2 years ago, our department got hit with a virus and we were held ransom and we lost all of the footage. So there wouldn't be any of that footage available. For this case or any other case.
That's all the questions I have, Judge.
All right, any other?
No, no additional questions, Your Honor.
Before you step down, you would say that that's pretty lost, unless it was provided to a third party before y'all were hacked. Okay, so it could possibly be out there.
It was I want to say that all of it, and I'm not an expert at it, Your Honor, so please don't quote me on it. If I'm not mistaken, it was all stored on a server that I can't remember the name of the company right offhand. It was all stored on that server. The server was hacked, and we lost everything when it came to it.
I guess what I'm getting at is that if you had already produced it to someone in the district attorney's office for their instruction, and they didn't use that same server, it's possible that it might still exist.
It could be possible.
Just wanted to know, we need to look somewhere. You can step down after you remaster. Then we'll need our cleaning crew back. And you're still be on call, cell phone, I think they have your cell phone.
Yes, sir.
Judge, while the stand is being sanitized, may I briefly be excused? I will be back momentarily, Judge.
Can't hear, I'm sorry. How many do I have? Four more? One more. Okay. Thank you.
Doing one or two more before, do you think we get one or two more in?
I think so, yeah. I think we can probably get a couple of them, at least two.
Go till then.
At least I think so.
Ready for the next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, at this time, the state calls Officer George Padgett.
Once you've been given the oath, you may be seated and remove your mask, all right?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can have a seat, please. Could you go ahead and please state your name for the record and spell it?
My name is George Padgett, George, last name Padgett, Padgett.
Hi. And how are you employed?
I work for the Henry County Bureau of Police Services.
You move a little closer to that microphone, it's been sanitized.
And how, did you say the Henry County Police Department?
Henry County Police Department.
Okay, how long have you been with the Henry County Police Department?
A little over 32 years.
Okay, and back in October of 2016, were you employed by the Henry County Police Department?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and were you on duty that day?
Yes, I was.
And in what capacity do you work for the police department?
I'm a road police officer.
At any point, did you respond to 3300 Highway 81 East in McDonough?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what was the purpose of you going to that location?
Officer Fergoli at approximately 9:52 a.m. had located a a vehicle that a lookout had been given over, possible homicide suspect. He located the vehicle and asked for assistance. 9:52 hour, that's when he made the call, and I responded and got there at 9:58.
And when you arrived at 9:58, what did you observe?
Officer Fergoli and Officer Danielson had three females and 2 males at gunpoint laying. They were prone on the ground.
And on the ground, was that in the street, on the driveway?
It was the driveway.
In the driveway, okay. All right, now at that point, and when they were on the ground, did you know who any of these folks were?
I did not.
At any point, did you handcuff anyone?
Yes, I did.
Who did you handcuff?
It was Jacob Tillman Williams.
All right, and was he one of the people who had come out of the Jeep?
Yes.
And once you handcuffed Mr. Williams, what did you do?
I escorted him back to my vehicle that was parked on the shoulder of Highway 81 East. Handcuffed him, I searched him for weapons and drugs, and then I placed him in the rear of my patrol vehicle for his and my safety.
Right. And now when you say his and my safety, did you know, were y'all looking for Jacob Koski that day?
Yes.
Right. Did you know at that point that Jacob Koski was the suspect in at that time, what was a triple homicide with a 4th victim in the hospital?
Yes.
And at that point, did you have reason to believe that Jacob Koski was in that residence, or possibly in that residence at 3300 Highway 81 East?
I had no idea what Jacob Koski looked like.
Okay.
But yes, we thought either the gentleman that I placed in cuffs or either somebody else at the house was Koski.
And so at the time that you handcuffed him, you didn't know who he was?
No, I did not.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, at any point did officers go into the home there to look for Jacob Koski?
Yes.
Okay, were you one of those officers?
I was not. I was by the roadway with Mr. Williams.
Okay. Once the other officers did go into the residence and didn't locate Mr. Koski, what did you do?
I was instructed to pull up into the driveway and by Lieutenant Bolton.
Okay. And what did you do once you did that?
I pulled up and Lieutenant Bolton removed Mr. Williams from my patrol vehicle and removed his handcuffs.
At that point, it was everyone who had been handcuffed, were their handcuffs removed at that point?
As far as I know, yes.
At any point, did you transport or give anyone a ride to the Henry County Police Department to be interviewed?
Yes.
Okay, and who was that?
I transported Jacob Williams and Matthew Baker.
Did they agree to come up to be interviewed?
Yes.
Did anybody force them to be interviewed?
No.
Was there anything about your interaction with them or any interaction that you observed other officers have specifically with Matthew Baker that made you think that he was being forced or intimidated into getting in your car for a ride up to the police department?
No.
Objection, speculation.
Objection over.
At any point did Matthew Baker say he didn't want to go to the police department?
No.
At any point did Matthew Baker give any indication, nonverbal or verbal, that he didn't want to go to the police department to be interviewed?
No.
At any point did Matthew Baker give any indication that he was being forced to do this?
No.
Do you recall who it was that asked you to give them a ride to the police department?
Lieutenant Bolton.
And when he asked you to give them a ride, were they in handcuffs?
They were not.
Were they in any way restrained?
They were not.
Was there anything about the situation, based on your personal observations, that seemed that Matthew Baker was being forced to get into your patrol car?
He did not appear, he was not forced.
Based on what you observed of Matthew Baker's interaction with other officers there as well as yourself, did it appear that he came to the police department freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
During the ride to the police department, did he ever say anything or give any indication that he wanted to get out of your car?
No, he did not.
Did you ever hear him say anything to Jacob Williams that he didn't want to talk or he didn't want to be there?
Did not hear.
When you say you did not hear...
I didn't hear him request to get out or...
Okay. At any point during the ride to the police department, were Matthew Baker and Jacob Tillman chit-chatting with each other?
Yes, they were.
Was that an easy kind of conversation?
Yes.
Was there anything about that conversation that made you think that Matthew Baker was in any sort of distress or fear or concern?
No.
And then once you arrived at the police department, did you have any further interaction with Matthew Baker?
No.
Did you see, when you got there and you saw the folks that were on the ground, did that include Matthew Baker and Jacob Williams that you ended up transporting?
No.
They were not the people that were on the ground?
Mr. Williams was. I don't know where Mr. Baker was.
At any point once the house was cleared and it was determined that Jacob Koski was not in the house, did you see Matthew Baker at any point after that in handcuffs?
No.
So he was unhandcuffed as well as Mr. Tillman?
Yes.
As well as Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many officers were there that day?
Just roughly guessing probably a dozen.
And does that include the officers that went in and cleared the house?
When the officers clearing the house, there were officers doing traffic control. Not all the officers were there, were actually on the property. They'd much been in the general area assisting the officers that were making entry into the house.
Okay. And does that include the officers or the detectives from CID that made it to the scene, or any officers that came to the scene?
I believe Lieutenant Bolton was one of the, I think he was a CID at the time, so yes, there will be some CID people there.
Was there anything about your interaction with Matthew Baker that made you think that he was under any sort of duress?
No.
Is there anything about your interaction with Matthew Baker that gave you the indication that he was in any way being forced to do anything?
No.
And do you see Matthew Baker in court today?
Yes.
Okay, can you describe him and where he's located?
Just to my left, he's wearing a dark jacket, white shirt, and a charcoal striped tie.
All right, Your Honor, if the record would reflect, he has identified the defendant, Matthew Baker. Is that the young man that you transported that day?
Yes.
The record was all reflected.
Thank you, Your That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Cross?
Yes, Judge. Good morning, Officer Padgett. You're post-certified, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you arrived at 9:58 a.m., which is about 6 minutes or so after the request for backup was sent out. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when you arrived, you saw 3 females and 2 males being held on the ground at gunpoint, right?
Correct.
When you stepped out of your vehicle, did you draw your firearm?
Yes.
Okay. When you arrived, did you have your lights and sirens on?
Yes.
Were you in a marked car or an unmarked car?
A marked car.
How were you dressed that day? Were you in a uniform like you are today?
Yes. I don't know if it was a long sleeve or short sleeve, but it was
But you were in the uniform with the badge, right?
yes.
And with your gun, right?
Yes.
Now, did you attend the roll call the morning of October 27th, 2016?
Yes.
And during that roll call, did they mention Jacob Koski as the suspect, right?
Yes.
But they did not mention Mr. Baker as the primary suspect, is that right?
That's correct.
When you arrived, you said you put handcuffs on Jacob Williams, right?
That's correct.
Did you put handcuffs on anyone else?
No, ma'am.
Did you see other officers put handcuffs on any of the other individuals in the driveway?
After I handcuffed Mr. Williams, he was my sole responsibility, and my car was parked quite a ways away from where they were, so no, I didn't see anybody else get handcuffed.
From your own personal observation, you don't know one way or the other whether the other individuals were handcuffed, right?
No, I do not know.
Okay. And when you took Mr. Williams to your patrol car, you put him in the back of your patrol car, right?
That's correct.
Did you close the door?
Yes.
And when someone's in the back of the patrol car, are they able to open the door themselves, or do you need to do that for them?
They cannot open the doors.
Okay. And at that point, you weren't watching Mr. Baker at that point, right? You were focused on Mr. Williams, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So you weren't present for the conversation where Mr. Baker was asked to come to the police station, right?
That's correct.
So you don't know the exact phrasing of that conversation between Mr. Baker and whoever asked him to go to the station, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And do you know who it was that had that conversation with Mr. Baker who asked him to come to the police station?
I believe it was Lieutenant Bolton that asked me to give him a ride to the police station.
Okay.
I don't know who asked Mr. Baker to go to the police station.
And were you present for the conversation where Mr. Williams was asked to go to the police station?
I was not.
When you escorted or when you drove Mr. Baker and Mr. Williams to the police station, did Mr. Baker ride in the front seat, in the back seat?
We both rode in the back seat.
Was Mr. Baker handcuffed at the time that he was in that vehicle?
No.
Is there a partition between you and whoever's in the back of that vehicle?
Yes.
And again, whenever you arrived at the police station, did you need to step out of your vehicle and open the door for Mr. Baker and Mr. Williams to exit the police car?
That's correct.
And during that drive, well, let's actually back up. While you are still at 3300 Highway 81, did you ever tell Mr. Baker that he did not have to come to the police station if he didn't want to?
No.
Did you hear anyone else tell Mr. Baker he did not have to come to the police station if he didn't want to?
No.
During the drive from, how long is the drive from 3300 Highway 81 to the police station? About how many minutes?
10, 15 minutes for traffic.
During that time, did you tell Mr. Baker, hey, if you don't want to do this, I'll take you back home? Did you have that kind of conversation
I
with
didn't
him?
talk to him.
Okay.
The only conversation I may have had with him, asking him was either too hot or too cold, but that was it.
Now, you said that, on direct, that you, believe that the other individuals that had been in that Jeep were unhandcuffed. Did you see officers unhandcuff them, or were you focused on Mr. Williams?
I believe everybody had been unhandcuffed. I don't know who unhandcuffed them, but everybody was unhandcuffed.
But did you see someone unhandcuff them?
I can't remember who, I probably took my cuffs off, and I don't know who took other people's cuffs off.
But you didn't remove handcuffs from anyone, right?
I may have removed them. I don't remember. I don't recall.
But you weren't present in the driveway when the other individuals were unhandcuffed. Would that be right?
Yes.
Okay. And it's just that you just didn't see it, right?
I didn't see that. I don't recall.
I'm just making sure I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. Now, when you arrived at the police station, did you walk into the building with Mr. Williams and Mr. Baker?
No, I did not.
Did someone come out of the building to meet you?
Yes.
And who was that?
That was Officer Reed.
Was there ever a moment where Mr. Baker and or Mr. Williams were not with? Let me rephrase the question. From the time that Mr. Williams and Mr. Baker got in your patrol car on Highway 81 until Officer Reed meets you at the police station, was there ever a moment where Mr. Baker and Mr. Williams was not within your line of sight, or where you weren't able to observe them?
I was able to observe him for the entire ride, yes.
So you didn't, I guess, to make sure that I give you an opportunity to explain, you didn't just drop them off and let them walk on in. You handed them off to.
That's correct.
Okay. And in your own report, the way that you phrase it, I just want to make sure that I'm using correct police terminology, was that you released them to Officer Reed to watch them until detectives could get their statements. Is that right? That was what you had asked to do, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have to form the judge. I just have two questions for you. My first question was, did you offer to let Mr. Baker go to the police station in his own vehicle? Did you make that offer to him?
No, I did not.
Okay. Now, my last few questions here are, when you arrived at the police station, did you arrive at the front door? Did you arrive at a sally port? Can you tell us how that went?
It was the employee entrance on the side of the building.
Okay. So it would be an entrance that I, as non-law enforcement, could just walk up to, right?
You couldn't get in, no.
Okay. You had to use your badge or like a swipe card or something
Yes.
like that in order to get in there. Okay. Describe that area for me just a little bit more. Is that an area that's secured off by a fence, by gates? How does that work?
It's fenced in, but the gates are always open. And you can immediately walk in and walk out.
You can can walk in and walk out, right? Like, as a law enforcement officer, you can walk in and walk out.
Anybody can walk in off the street, the gates are always open. There's a chain link fence up and there's two gates. And the gates have never worked, the gates have always been open.
Okay, but I couldn't go into but this was an employee entrance, right?
The parking lot, the public can get into.
Okay. But the actual entrance, the actual way that you get into the building, that's employee only.
You have to have a key card to get inside there, yeah.
Okay. So I could pull up to the as a non-law enforcement person, I could come up to the parking lot, but I have to use a different entrance into the building.
That's correct.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that. And I apologize. I said I only had one more question, but I now really only have one more question. Had you ever met Mr. Baker before that day, or had any conversations with Mr. Baker, or were you familiar with Mr. Baker prior to the morning of October 27th, 2016?
I have been to 3300 Highway 81 East on a couple of calls before.
Okay.
And I don't know if I've dealt with Mr. Baker or if it was with his brother.
Okay.
But I have been to the house before.
But you don't yourself recall anything or having any conversations specifically with Mr. Baker, right?
I can't recall.
Okay. And just to make sure that the record reflects, sitting at this table, you have me, who is a white woman, right?
Yes.
And then you have Mr. Studelska, who is a white man, correct?
Yes.
And you have Ms. Galloway, who is a black woman, correct?
Yes.
And the only black male at the table is the person that you identified as Mr. Baker, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Read the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Padgett, I know that you testified that you didn't specifically see folks having the cuffs taken off, but let me ask it this way. Once Lieutenant Bolton uncuffed Mr. Williams, was anyone else at the scene that you saw handcuffed?
No.
Okay. So at that point, even though you didn't specifically see the handcuffs come off, you can testify that at that point, everybody had their handcuffs removed.
That's correct.
Let's talk a little bit about when you went to the police department and you drove Mr. Baker and Mr. Williams there. Officer Reed had to come out to get them because they can't get in that door. Is that what you testified to earlier?
That's correct.
Okay. And so when he came out to get them, did he handcuff them?
No.
Did he force them in the building?
No.
Did what you observed with Mr. Baker specifically, did he freely and voluntarily get out of your car and go into that employee entrance in the building?
Objection, speculation?
Well,
He doesn't know whether Mr. Baker is, what is the contents of Mr. Baker's head.
Ms. Reed, the facts get laid out and conclusions get drawn after the facts are laid out. If you want to lay out the facts, what he observed that led him to that, we might be able to say that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We can't.
Based on what you observed, was there anything about his getting out of your car and going into the building that seemed, based on what you observed, that he was not willing to do that?
No, he was willing to go inside. He freely walked in on his own.
Okay. Did he in any way seem to hesitate in going into the building?
No.
Did he in any way grab onto anything to prevent himself from going in the building?
No.
Did he ever say, I don't want to go in there?
No, he did not.
Did he ever give you any other kind of nonverbal indication that he was not willing to go into that building with Officer Reed?
No, he did not.
Did Officer Reed force him in the building?
No, he did not.
Did Officer Reed drag him in the building?
No, he did not.
Did Officer Reed bring him into the police department at gunpoint?
No, he did not.
Did Officer Reed do anything that you observed that was in any way forceful or threatening to Mr. Baker to have him go into the police department to give a statement?
No, he did not.
And to be clear, this area that you pulled into, that parking lot area, you said that parking lot area is open to the public?
Public can get in, yes.
Okay. And public can get out?
Public can get out.
So if Mr. Baker wanted to walk away from you, would he have been able to walk out that open gate?
Yes.
At that point, when you were bringing him to the police department, was he under arrest?
No, he was not.
Was he in any way being detained at that point?
No, he was not.
Was it your understanding that he was coming up there to freely and voluntarily give a statement to the detectives?
Yes.
And just to be clear, Officer Reed, is Officer Reed still with us?
No, he's not.
And for clarification, he has passed away?
He's deceased.
That's all the questions that I have, Your Honor.
How was Officer Reed dressed whenever he came out to pick up Mr. Williams and Mr. Baker from you?
He was in a police uniform.
Did he have a firearm with him?
Yes, he did.
Now the area where Officer Reed picked up Mr. Williams and Mr. Baker, you said that that's fenced off. There's a sign there that says employees only, right?
I don't recall seeing one that says employees only.
The only reason that people can come and go is because the gate's broken, right?
The gates are always open.
Are they open because people can freely come and go, or are they open because they don't work?
I have never seen the gates work since we've been in that building. The gates have always been open.
But this area is fenced off from the rest of the parking lot?
It's the back side of the building. There's one little notch in area where the building recesses. And just there's a road or a fence. There's a fence erected at the edge of the parking lot to distinguish it from the actual roadway.
Okay. Is there anything separating the parking lot from this area?
I'm sorry?
Is there anything separating the main parking lot from the area where Officer Reed picked up Mr. Baker?
I don't understand what you mean by this area.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, because I've heard a couple different things about gates and this and that, and I'm trying to get in my head exactly what this looks like. Is it one big giant parking lot with no divisions, no separated fences? Or are there different sections to this parking area?
There's a back section that does have a closed gate, which is used for storing evidence.
Okay.
So there's a lock on it, or a closed lock gate. But the actual employee parking lot back in the back, there's two gates or openings. There's a gate there, but they've never worked, and those are always open. And then immediately past the fence would be like the white line on the edge of the roadway. It's immediately on the road. So that's the fence is there separating the roadway from the parking lot.
And is that the employee parking lot or the public parking lot?
That is the employee parking lot. The Uniform Patrol Division, that's where we go for our roll calls and that's where we park our patrol vehicles.
And that's a separate area from where civilians would go to pick up a police report
Yes.
or something like that. Okay.
Yes.
Now, is there anything separating the civilian parking lot from the employee parking lot? Any curbs or fences or anything like that?
You could walk from the front parking lot directly beside the building and then walk directly into the uniform patrol division parking lot.
But my question is, are there any fences or anything there? Is that where the gates are that you're talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
I think I understand. I don't believe I have any other questions right now. Thank you, officer.
Redirect,
No, Your Honor.
before you step down, for clarification purposes, is this where have you transported other people for purposes of giving a statement before?
Yes.
Is that the door you know, since that building's been used by the police department?
Yes.
Is that the door you always?
Yes, so the interview rooms that's the shortest way to get to the interview rooms.
Oh, okay. Is I guess your badge work on that door? You can go in that door yourself?
Yes.
Is it always that someone comes out, or you just sometimes walk in?
Sometimes walking in.
Okay, so Officer Reed came out from, you called him or someone else?
I was just told Officer who was gonna meet me there, so.
So someone else must have given Officer Reed the heads up once he said point. Okay, that you were out there.
If somebody else had already instructed him to meet me in the park.
Okay. If you wanted to go to the interview room and not go through the employee parking lot and the employee entrance, you could come through the front entrance of the building, is that right?
That's correct.
But the building beyond the public area is still secure.
That's correct.
You have to have someone let you in that secure area.
That's correct.
So either way, you go in that door or you go in the public area, you're gonna have to get in the secure area with an officer
That's correct.
or someone who has the proper credentials.
That's correct.
Have you ever dropped anybody off at the front?
No.
Okay. So sort of the protocol to drop them off in that rear area.
Yes.
Okay. That prompt anybody to have a question?
I don't have any further questions, Judge.
There's nothing that prevents you from going to the location of the Henry County Police Department in McDowell, Georgia, on Arraignment Boulevard. Google it, put it on maps. You can ride over there at lunchtime if you like, and you'll see exactly what's there. And if we need this officer back to answer any questions after you do that, there's nothing improper about going over there and looking at it. Now, it'd be difficult to take Mr. Baker over there. He's got to stay where he's staying. But you can go. Or all three of y'all. All right, officer, any other questions for this officer?
Briefly, Judge, based on some of your questions. Officer Padgett, when you drop someone at the front, if you were to ever drop someone off at the front door, they walk into what is essentially a lobby, is that correct?
That's correct.
And if they were to go back to an interview room through that front door, would another officer have to come and let them in because that door is secured?
Yes, they have to be escorted.
Okay. And the interview rooms are in what part of the building? The front part closest to the lobby or the back part closest to where you dropped Mr. Baker off?
The back part close to where I dropped him off.
That's all the questions I have, Judge.
Anything else? All right, you step down and you're, I'm assuming someone's got your cell number in case they need to call you. Thank you for your 32 years and many more. Thank you.
Sure.
Why everybody wear a long sleeve and sit in the clothes long enough to understand why. All right, we'll have the cleaning lady come on up.
I'm gonna try to
About
do.
25 minutes.
I'm gonna try to do the other three.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna try to do the other three.
Oh, you think you'll be able to get them done within the next 3 minutes? Okay.
Because the last two are very short.
I'm so sorry.
The last two are very short. Okay.
Okay.
have another witness?
Yes, Judge, I have several. Yes.
Let's do one at least.
One at a time. Officer Matthew Phillips, please.
Remain standing while we will give you an oath, and once you're seated, you can sit down and do your math.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony of this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, you can put your hand down, you can have a seat, and if you'd like to, you can remove your mask.
Make sure you get as close to the microphone as you can, sir.
Could you go ahead and please state and spell your name for the record?
Matthew Phillips, M-A-T-T-H-E-W, Phillips, P-H-I-L-L-I-P-S.
And where are you employed?
Henry County Police Department,
And in what capacity do you work for the Henry County Police Department?
K-9 handler.
And back in 2016, were you employed by the Henry County Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Specifically on October 27th, 2016, in the morning hours, were you on duty that day?
Yes.
Okay. And at around 9:52 or so that day, were you on duty or leaving or getting off duty? What was your shift at that point?
I worked from 10 at night until 8 in the morning.
But you were still working around 9:52?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did you hear anything that gave you a reason to respond to 3300 Highway 81 East?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what did you hear?
Heard a radio transmission from Officer Fergoli that he had located a suspect vehicle from a homicide we had the night prior or early that morning.
Okay. And when he had indicated that he located that vehicle, was he asking for backup?
Yes.
And did you respond as backup?
Yes.
And when you got there, what did you observe?
Officer Fergoli in the driveway behind a white, cream-colored four-door Jeep Cherokee, I believe.
And were there any other people there with the officer, Officer Fergoli?
Yes, there were 5 different occupants that were in the vehicle.
And were they inside the vehicle or outside the vehicle at that point?
When I got there, they were already on the ground out of the vehicle.
And when they were on the ground, where on the ground? Near the vehicle or somewhere else?
Close to the vehicle.
And as they were out, describe the driveway to this location.
It comes in from where Highway 81 is at the driveway. So it's coming down 2 hills and sits on the hill. So relatively, well, it's a medium length driveway. Goes and it splits in 2 different directions, going to a house to the left and a house to the right.
And if you're standing at the street, is the 3300 Highway 81, is that the house to the right or to the left?
To the right.
And can you see the house from the street?
Yes.
Is the driveway that long that you can't see anything?
No, ma'am. You can still see.
Is the driveway is the house obstructed in any way by anything in the front yard?
There's a small patch of trees in the front yard.
Okay, but you're still able to see through those trees? All right, so when you arrived and these folks were in the driveway area, what did you do?
I provided security on the house or cover for the officers in the driveway facing the house.
And at that point, were you aware that officers were looking for Jacob Koski as a main suspect in a triple homicide and a 4th person being sent to the hospital?
Yes.
Did you detain anyone specifically there at the scene?
Yes.
Okay, and who did you detain?
I detained Kayla Head and Brooke Knight.
And when you said you detained them, what did you do to detain them?
They were placing handcuffs.
Okay. And did they stay there in the driveway, or did you have them step away from the driveway?
No, they were moved from the driveway up to the roadway.
And what was the purpose of that, of moving them away from the driveway?
Scene security.
At that point, did you know whether or not Jacob Koski or anyone else was in the house and potentially armed?
No.
Is that one of the reasons why you all moved them away from the house?
Yes.
Did you speak to Matthew Baker that day?
Not really.
Okay. And you say not really. Did you hear Matthew Baker speak that day?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask it a better way. Did any of the officers that were there ask about Mr. Koski, if anyone had seen Mr. Koski?
Yes.
And what was anybody's response?
They had seen him the night before while they were at a party.
And was that Mr. Baker that said that, or someone else?
I believe it was Miss Knight that said that to me.
And did anyone ask whether or not Jacob Koski was in the house?
Yes, I believe Lieutenant Bolton asked that.
And was there any response regarding that?
Directly, I do not believe so. I know at one point that Mr. Baker made his spontaneous utterance once the officers were going to the house that Koski was not inside the house.
So he didn't say that in response to Lieutenant Bolton's question. He said that in response to the officers proceeding into the house?
Yes.
When officers were inside the house, were you aware of anything regarding a dog?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain that to the judge?
So, as the officers were clearing the house, they make their way in my room, dynamic search, for persons, they secured the suite. They got to the garage area of the house, realized there was a very large aggressive dog in the garage. Called for Mr. Baker, said it was his dog, to come up, retrieve the dog, move it to a room that had already been previously cleared and secured. That way they could go in and finish checking the garage.
Okay. And do you know who, did anyone escort Mr. Baker to the house so that he could do that with the dog?
I did.
Okay, that was you?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Mr. Baker handcuffed when he went into the house?
The handcuffs were removed. I cannot recall exactly when, if it was inside the house or outside the house.
Okay. And then was he placed back in handcuffs once he secured the dog and came back out?
Yes.
And then later on, were everyone's handcuffs removed?
Yes.
And when I say everyone, I'm specifically asking you, were Matthew Baker's handcuffs removed once the house was cleared and Jacob Koski was not found in the house?
Correct, yes.
As you, did you have any dealings with Kayla Head?
Yes.
Okay, and did she make any spontaneous utterances in your presence?
She did.
And what was that?
Miss Head made spontaneous utterance of, "Oh my God, I'm really far away from that house or murder." She also made spontaneous utterance of, "He killed people," and as well as referencing Mr. Koski using her phone, saying that she has to do these things she's much needed to. And also, I drove a car for her.
And once everybody was out of handcuffs, was anybody forced to go anywhere there at the house? Okay, so once the scene was secured, Jacob Koski was not found inside the residence. Everyone was uncuffed. Were the folks who had been cuffed, were they kind of just freely walking around the property at that point?
Everybody was kind of just hanging out in the driveway area.
Okay. Was anyone at that point being detained?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Was anyone being told, no, you have to sit there?
Not to my knowledge.
Was anyone being told, no, you can't leave? And when you say not to my knowledge, were you present, were you around all of these folks?
Once the handcuffs were removed, they were taken back to the driveway. That's when I called out of service and I ended my tour duty.
Okay. But when you ended your tour of duty, everybody was
Correct.
unhandcuffed.
Right.
And nobody appeared to be in any way, shape, or form detained.
No.
To your recollection, do you recall about how long it was from the time that you got there until everybody was uncuffed?
I would say probably 5 to 10 minutes.
And is that because once they cleared the house, there was no reason to keep everyone cuffed?
Correct.
Objection leading.
Well, and so once everyone was uncuffed, did they start talking to officers trying to find out what was going on, or were they just keeping to themselves?
I think this is an objection, and I'll sustain it. Rephrase your question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Once everyone was uncuffed, did they interact with each other or stay to themselves separately, based on what you observed?
To my knowledge, they were just all in the same area. I'm not sure what was being said between them, but they were all just around each other.
Did you hear whether or not Mr. Baker was asked if he would come to the police department to make a statement?
I did not get that.
After everyone was uncuffed, how long did you remain there at the house?
I was gone very quickly. Once we realized that the scene was actually secured and there was no threat at the house, we had all of Highway 81 blocked, so we needed to get cars out of the roadways, and basically only the people that were there for the investigation purpose remained.
So if you had to estimate within 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes?
Like less than a minute.
All right, that's all the questions I have.
Cross?
Yes, Judge. Officer, today you are wearing a police uniform, badge and everything. Is that how you were dressed on October 27th, 2016?
I was in a duty uniform, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you have your firearm with you that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you draw your firearm that day?
Yes.
Now, when you arrived, were you in a marked or unmarked vehicle? Do you recall whether you had lights and sirens on that day?
I do not.
Okay. About how many officers would you estimate were there that day?
15 to 20.
You saw 5 people near the Jeep when you arrived, right?
Correct.
They were 3 women and 2 men?
Correct.
And they were on the ground? And officers already had them at gunpoint at that moment, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you placed handcuffs on Miss Head and Miss Knight, correct?
Correct.
And you personally observed other officers put handcuffs on Mr. Williams and Mr. Baker, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Did you personally remove the handcuffs from Miss Knight and Miss Head? Or did someone else do that?
I would have removed those, yes, because they were my handcuffs. I would be retrieving my handcuffs.
Okay. And did you personally remove or see someone remove the handcuffs from Mr. Baker?
I saw them remove these.
Do you know who removed them?
That I do.
Okay, but you saw them
Yes.
yourself, okay. Now, officer, as you've been testifying, you've been looking at a piece of paper. That's your report from this day. Is that
Yes.
right? Okay. Your Honor, may I approach?
Certainly.
This is just his report. Okay. Officer, I'm showing you what has been marked for identification purposes and has been shown to the state. It's been marked as defense exhibit A. I'm going to hand this document to you and I want you to take a look at it momentarily. Sir, do you recognize that document?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that document?
It is a supplemental report from the accident that day.
And that's the one that you prepared?
Yes.
Now, does that appear to be a accurate copy of that report?
At a glance, yes, it does.
I'm so sorry, sir.
At a glance, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And, officer, during your testimony today, you've been using that to refresh your recollection, is that correct?
For direct quotes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that's because there's a lot of details that happened, right?
Correct.
And that's because it happened several years ago, right? May I approach you, Your Honor?
Yes, and what would we do in the letter or number?
It is A, Defense Exhibit A, Your Honor. And Your Honor, I would like to tender into evidence Defense Exhibit A.
Any objection?
I guess for what purpose? Is it for the purpose of impeachment? I guess I would object because typically we don't tender in.
Well, if it's a legitimate document that is identified as the one he prepared, I don't know, it may not be totally relevant, but maybe there's something in there that, kernel of something that will help. It's not admit A, which limits us to 26 letters of the alphabet unless we get into double A and double B. Okay?
I assure you, Your Honor, I am not admitting 26 exhibits today.
Okay, good.
And Your Honor, that has been admitted. Now, Officer Phillips, were you present at roll call the morning of October 27th, 2016?
For which shift, ma'am?
Actually, let me rephrase the question. During the roll call that you attended on the 26th and or the 27th, did they mention the incident on Moccasin Gap Road?
I was on a roll call where this was talked about. We attend roll call prior to our shifts.
Right. And your shift was started at 12 midnight prior to this, right?
10 p.m.
Okay. So when you arrived, did you know who the primary suspect was in this case?
Yes.
Okay.
So to Robert to this.
Yeah, when you
Okay,
arrived
yes,
on the
yes.
morning of the 27th, you knew who the primary suspect was, right?
Yes.
And that person was Jacob Koski, correct?
Yes.
And that primary suspect was not Matthew Baker, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you didn't hear or weren't present for any conversations in which Mr. Baker was asked to come to the police station to make a statement, right?
Correct. That was not.
Okay. You just didn't hear it one way or the other.
Right.
Okay. And you, about how many minutes would you say that you were on scene total?
Maybe 15 minutes, I would guess.
And after the individuals were unhandcuffed, you left pretty quick after that. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just another question or two. When you were there observing the people that had been detained, they weren't free to just go into the house, right?
Couldn't tell you what they were thinking, ma'am.
No, but if somebody had tried to go into the house, somebody would stop them. Would you say that that's fair?
I wasn't sure on where everybody was even, like, as far as officer watch or what they had going on, seeing where I was securing the people.
And so you said that you were securing the people, right?
Yes, the ones that were in handcuffs at the time, yes.
Okay. And then you said later, after they were unhandcuffed, you saw them as well, right?
Yes, everybody made their way back down to the driveway.
Okay, they were back out the driveway, but everyone was kind of together still, right?
Yes.
Nobody had left?
No.
And you didn't tell anybody they could leave, right? You didn't tell them they're free to leave? Did you hear anyone else tell them they were free to leave?
No.
And at that time, I believe that you said that there were, maybe a dozen or more police officers present at that time?
Yes.
Okay, just one moment. I just want to clarify one point. Earlier during direct, you said that there were probably around 20 officers or so there.
15.
And when you left, were there still about 20 officers or okay.
That's what I was saying, we were all trying to leave the Buffalo roadway back up.
Okay, and the reason you needed some people to leave was because there were so many police officers there. Okay. I don't believe I have any further questions, Judge.
You're right.
Yes, Your Honor. Officer Phillips, when you arrived and you said you drew your firearm, once everything was secured, did you reholster your firearm?
Yes, ma'am.
Did other officers reholster their firearms?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, once everyone was uncuffed and kind of milling about in that driveway area, was anyone at gunpoint?
No, ma'am.
Did any officers have their guns out at that point?
No, ma'am.
Had the situation drastically calmed down by that point?
Correct.
Once Mr. Koski was not found in the residence?
Yes.
And so all of this, from the time that you arrived on the scene and saw people in the driveway to the time that you cuffed them, they searched the house, they were uncuffed, and you left, that whole process took somewhere around 15 minutes?
Yes,
That's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Recross.
No request this time, Judge. Thank you.
You can step down, put your mask on, and you will be on call. We'll get the lady to clean up the witness booth, and otherwise we'll be excused for lunch. We'll come back at 1:30. I want the cleaning lady to come in to everybody, so she can get in and get out without having to intermingle with folks. I guess she's super today, because she's got all gloved up, sanitized herself, so I don't want to have her compromised.
Your Honor, while we're waiting for her, may I ask make one announcement?
Sure.
Brooke Knight has not been arraigned yet, and she was sent notice to come today for her arraignment. If I could sound for her. Is Brooke Knight here in the courtroom? Okay. She is here, Your Honor. She will have to be at some point this afternoon arraigned.
All right, well, you want to do that before we break for lunch?
If you would like to, Your Honor, yes.
Does she have a lawyer?
I do not know. This is the first time I've met Miss Knight.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, apparently our cleaning lady's vacated the premises, anticipating she can get in here after we left, so come on up. There she is. No, come on. Now, you don't need to stand up.
You can just break it.
Right there, there you go. And you have a copy of what she's supposed to be arraigned on. I don't have that.
I do, Your Honor. I have a copy of the indictment.
Well, I didn't know this was on here, so it may have been because I didn't look at the calendar, because I didn't, I knew what was on it. Okay?
I apologize, Your Honor. And Your Honor, if Miss Knight needs to get an attorney, I don't have any objection to that.
I want to get on the record the indictment number on it.
Yes, Your Honor, if I can have one
What she's
minute.
charged with, and I'll ask her some questions. If anybody's not interested to stay, y'all can go ahead and leave. If you want to, you don't have to wait on the cleaning lady, but she's gonna come in while we're gone.
Your Honor, I apologize, I thought that the clerk would have their file up here.
Well, they did, but I didn't need anything out of it because I didn't know this lady was part of it.
Yes, yes, Your Honor, she is. If I can have one moment, I can get a copy, or if you'd like to do it over after lunch, I can get a copy for the court.
Let me ask a couple of questions. Ms. Benita, do you know what she's charged with?
Yes, Your Honor, I have a not filed copy, but I do have a copy of it. She is charged with, bear with me. She's charged with making a false statement, Your Honor, under 161020, and I can get you the case number in one moment if you give me a moment.
Have you received a copy of anything charging you with anything this night?
I have copies, I do believe. I'm not really sure. It's been a while. But all I got was this letter.
Okay.
And then I'm not really sure. All that's at my grandma's.
All right, I apologize. System's a little slow.
You can move Mr. Baker if you want to. We're not, because we did.
Okay.
Nothing to do with him.
$470, $455, $456, we're getting a little bit moving.
You see somebody out there.
Or if I may approach, I can hand you my laptop, which shows you the case
You
number.
can just read it into the record.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, it's case number 2021 SUCR 579 HV. It charges Brooke Danielle Knight, and Kayla Head. She is charged in count 2. You want me to read the entire indictment, Your Honor? Count 2?
Yes, if you'll read the allegation.
Yes, Your Honor. She is charged with the offense of making a false statement under OCGA 161020 in that the said accused in the state and county aforesaid, that being Henry County, on or about the 27th day of October 2016, did knowingly and willfully make a false statement to Detective A.J. Mellon of the Henry County Police Department during a murder investigation, a matter within the jurisdiction of the Henry County Police Department, a department of the Henry County government. In that said accused falsely told Detective Mellon that Matthew Baker was not present at and near 635 Moccasin Gap Road during the time frame of the murder of Destiny Olinger, Sophia Bullard, Matthew Hicks, and Keith Gibson, contrary to the laws of said state, the peace, good order, and dignity thereof. And then additionally, Your Honor, the state has at all times material to this count of the indictment. The crime does not fall outside of this period in which a prosecution against this defendant must be commenced, because on March 14th, 2020, the Georgia Supreme Court, pursuant to OCGA 38-361, declared a statewide judicial emergency which would expire on Monday, June 7th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Further, pursuant to OCGA 30-3-62, during the period of the statewide judicial emergency, Chief Justice Harold Melton suspended, told, extended, and otherwise granted relief from any deadlines or any other time schedules or filing requirements imposed by otherwise applicable statutes, rules, regulations, or court orders, whether in civil or criminal cases or administrative matters, including any statute of limitation, contrary to the laws of the state, the good order, peace, and dignity thereof. A copy of said orders declaring and extending the statewide judicial emergency are attached hereto and made a part of this indictment, marked Exhibit A.
All right, before you get to the meat of the matter, you are in Brooke Danielle Knight.
Yes, sir.
All right, and that's you that's charged. That is a felony, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Maximum punishment being?
I believe it's 1 to 10 years, Your Honor.
1 to 10. All right. Now, before I ask you anything else, I need to make sure you're aware. Obviously, you know it's a serious event. You could end up in 10 years if you were found guilty of that. That's the maximum punishment. Do you have the means to procure a lawyer?
Yes, sir. I do want to get a lawyer.
And do you intend to hire your lawyer?
No, sir.
Do you represent yourself?
No, sir. Yeah, I do understand that, though. I just wanted to get a court-appointed attorney.
Well, the reason I'm asking the question is, as soon as you plead not guilty, which I assume will be what you plead, then a clock starts ticking, and it's probably 10 days. A lawyer or you yourself will have to file any motion that you may have in this case. Now, if you don't, technically, the motions, you lose the right to file those motions. So when I first arrange on any case, I always like to make sure the person is aware of that deadline and whether they'd like to have it postpone the arrangement till another day so that they can get someone to represent them to advise them concerning the situation before they enter a plea not guilty or guilty for that matter. Is that what you would like to do?
I would just like to plead like not guilty.
Okay, I'll let you do that. And I will tell you this, that the 10-day rule is hard and fast to some judges. This one, I always entertain a motion so that it might be reopened. If this is a type case that one would be appropriate for. It may not be. I don't know. I've not had a case like this in quite some time. And I just can't imagine what kind of motion you'd make. Drug case is totally different. Search and seizure case is totally different. But in these type cases, I'm not so sure. But anyway, she just wants to enter a not guilty plea. Would you escort her to the clerk's office? That's where the original is.
I will, Your Honor.
What you do is you sign that form that says not guilty, and then you get a copy of it. They'll get you a copy of it, and then it's down to go find a lawyer.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, one clarification. I think I said 1 to 10. It's a maximum of 5 years. I wanted to double check that.
But they change those things all the time.
I needed to double check and make sure it's a 1 to 5.
The 10 years didn't scare her 5 something along. But she's getting smart enough, she'll get your lawyer. So that's good. All right, we are done till 1:30 or maybe a little later. If we don't make it out of that at 1:30 because we're having this other issue delayed, do not panic. So all kinds of stuff, put somebody in the jail. I didn't know about that, I'm asking my package for the council. We had our seminar, but I didn't go because of my wife's health, so they brought me a package that had been asked.
You need to keep that one, as your safety one, just for case.
You too. My lunch lady came in and then she left it in. I have to go trash down.
We'll be back.
Yeah. She's hanging out there somewhere.
I got that here. Oh, that was.
See you about 128.
Now, you be here when I'll be here about 1:35. Something like that.
I said that was easy.
I'm gonna need help. My bag isn't working on my door.
You have to put it up and it turns red and pull it away and it takes about 3 seconds and it turns green. That's what's happening Yeah, now pull it away. There you go. That's what it did to me.
Miss Knight needs to be signed her indictment. You can get a copy. If I give you the case number, can you walk her down to the clerk's office?
Fine, how are you? Where do the trash cans go?
Now there's one there, there's one here.
Oh, all moved away from me. See y'all after a little bit. I'll be back a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I'll be open and back up by 1:15.
Okay.
That's still 128.
Well, that was for Judge, go get him.
I would do it, but I have an officer here. I gotta do a search warrant on a different case.
So you just, they need
Yeah.
a good work
You
on.
can just walk her down to the clerk's office. She has to sign not guilty on the indictment. Well, actually, I should probably do it on 15. All right, give me a second. No, I know you're capable of doing it.
You're doing pretty smart.
I know you are. It's not that. But I have to be able to say that I witnessed her do it, so I have to actually go down. Now that I think about it. Sorry.
You need this box in your office?
Yeah.
Okay, I got the box.
Okay.
There she is.
I'm gonna bring the laptop too. I'll take that sheet of paper. And then my.
Just wait right there, they're coming out that way.
It's raw for you, that's why. There we go. Thanks, sir. I want the bottom to fall out on you. You're golden.
You are.
There is a investigator sitting outside our office. Tell him I'm heading over in a few.
Who is it?
What the heck's his last name? Come on. Throw this on here. His name is